Now, the useEffect hook is a hook in React that will let you perform what we call the side effects in function components. So it is similar to component did mount, component did update, and component will unmount. And basically that means that here when the component is or did mount is when of course it was rendering for the first time. And of course, when you're updating, the component did update if the component is updating something, so it has to re-render and so forth. So useEffect actually works that way, and it is used. It's a powerful hook in React that is normally used, for example, when you want to fetch data from an API, or when you want to set up a subscription or a listener, or when you want to manually change the DOM in the React components. So how can we useEffect in React? So what we can do here is actually we can just modify our application, and here what I'll do here is I'm going to make a component which is going to fetch public data from a public API. So here I'm going to have a function data fetcher. Here we're going to change this one to data fetcher like that, and then here I'm going to have a data. Here I'm going to have set data like that, which is equal to use, and then here we pass null like that. So here let's also define another use state hook here, which is going to be loading. This is responsible for loading. This variable will be there to listen and load when we want data. Sorry, this should be loading like that, whereby we are going to set this one to be true. So when of course we are making a request from our public API, so we are setting it to true. Now here we are going to use we are now going to start with the useEffect, and so you're going to have, you can see automatically it gets imported there. So the useEffect, we are going to have this is what we are going to have. So we are going to have 3 braces there, and then here we have the curly brace. So now within the curly brace here from our data fetcher here, so here we're going to have a public API. So here we're going to define a const, and here we're going to have fetch, and then here we set this async. So you're going to use the async and wait. Sorry, why this? Okay, async, and this is how the syntax is. So here we're going to set up a try catch, which will enable us to handle any errors that we will get. So here we have const response, which is equals to await. Remember, of course, the async and wait is when now of course we are. It is normally used when we are fetching data. It's like you are calling somebody and then waiting for response. So that's the whole idea here. So here we're going to pass the URL. Of course, the URL is the public API. So here we have the public API as data like that, and then down here let's go to here. So once we get to fetch the data, what we're going to do here, we're going to define another variable which is called the result, which is going to be equal to wait, and then here we're going to have response dot JSON. Basically here we mean you are converting we are returning data as JSON. So here this is return data as JSON. So once we do that, we come here. So the next part here is now we have returned the data as JSON. So we want to take this set data function. So we call the set data function. So already there, and then here we're going to pass the result, and I'm sure you're able to understand what now this one means here. So here what means is that we are updating the state variable, and of course you know the state variable here is data with the new data, and this is the data now that has been returned from fetching it from this part here. Right, so Now next here we have the set loading like that, and here we are going to set this set loading to false. Remember, we only set it once when we were defining our state. Only at the time of request, or when we are now waiting for that given data to be fetched, is only when it's going to be true. So that's where we are setting it from. So here we set it false so that once the data is fetched, it doesn't keep showing us the loading. Remember that loading, the loading words and so forth. I'm going to show you where we're going to implement it. So here we pass this one if we want to check for any error. So here we are passing console. So here we are passing, sorry, not console. Zip this. So here we are passing the catch. Remember, it is a try. So we try if there's any error, we're going to catch that error here. And then here, what we'll do here is you're going to have console.error like this. And then here we're going to have error fetching data. And then if we have error fetching data, we get to know what kind of error is that. So that one will give us the error. We're also going to call again the state loading, which we are also going to set to false. And this basically means is that even when there's an error, we want to ensure that the loading is not also showing there, because that will not be a good user experience. So we disable it as that. Here now we are going to have fetch, going to call the function, which is, of course, this is called calling the function. And here when we call the function, of course, we want it to now to fetch our data, because it's a function call. And then here we're going to set our use effect to an empty array. Basically, this means that this is just initial render of our use effect. So we're going to set it that way. And then once we have that one, now we can now return our given data here. All right, now before we go to the return, what we're going to do here is, because we had set the loading, so here I'm going to pass the loading here like this, and then here I'm going to have a return statement, which is div, and then here we are going to say loading. So this one, of course, this variable, of course, it is coming here. So here we set it true, so it means it's going to run at that given time. But if, for example, we don't get any new data, we are going to set it to false. Same case, if we get an error, we are also setting it to false. So I believe you understand that part there. Now here we can now return our given data once we get to fetch it successfully. So here I'm going to say data loaded like this, and here this is speed tag is going to be something like this. So I'm going to change it like that. So data loaded, and then now here we can do something we call, so here I'm going to pass what we call the data and then dot map. I remember I did this video sometimes back, so if you may want to check, you may just go to my channel and type JavaScript advanced array concepts. You'll be able to learn what we mean by data.map and so forth. So here we have this we pass item, and here what we want to do here is that we want to map through our data array and render our given items. And of course, that is the data from the public API. So here we're going to have this, so one should that way. So here we're going to have an li, and then here we're going to set the key to item dot id, so we get the id and then we close it like that. We're also going to have another one, which is going to be item dot title like that. And then once we get to have that one, we can come here just beneath here and close this one together with that, and then as well as also going to close the ul. Did we start with any ul? So here we can use a ul here, because we are using we're already using an li, so it means that we need to have an ul like that. So I'm going to close it there, and then we already have our div, which is that one there. We're also going to have this is going to remain as it is, and the data fetcher as it is. So let's just check this error here. So this I forgot this one. So we have a curly brace here for this part here because we are ending two here. So there are two here, and then of course the one for return. All right, so that is what we have, and then we also have an issue with our this is import. Do we have any other error? So we are missing semicolon on line 38.7. Okay, so this is also typo. Okay, so this is what we have, and we already know this is okay. So I named this one as counter dot, so I can also change this one to data fetcher so that it can make sense since I did not create another one. So what we can do here, we also need to change this to this one, and we can remove that one like that. Okay, all right, so this is what we have, and can try to run this again. So this tells me there is an issue in our given. Okay, so we did not get I did not place the URL, so it's trying to fetch for an empty thing. Okay, now this is the URL here, and what we have here is just, you can get this URL from the JSON placeholder. So this is the website for JSON and so forth. So you can get this website, sorry, you can get this URL here, because even when I run it here within my Chrome, I'm able still to get this data. You can see this data is in JSON format, but remember we converted it so that it can be readable for our case. So this is now what we call the use effect, and we're using the use effect hook so as to fetch our data that is using a public API. Now there's something we also call the dependency. We can pass use effect a dependency array, and what will happen is that this initial render can now be subsequent renders within our given application here. So subsequent renders basically means that if we pass a dependency here, then this application is, in other words, this use effect hook is going to re-render based on, for example, an input change by a user and so forth. So for example, let me just do something small here. So what we can do here is, let's say for example, I take out all that like that, and then we also remove the loading. We're also going to remain with that one, and then now here on the use effect, I can have something like this. So for example, I can have input value, and of course if I'm using it, it means I need to have defined it here. So here we can have input value, and then here we have set input value like that, and then here we use the useState, and then we pass empty. Empty basically means it's going to wait for a user to input a value. So we are setting it that way. So here we say if. So if here it means that we want to fetch data from an API whenever the input value will change. So that's why we are passing if, and then we say here fetch. Then here we're going to use two backticks. I don't know if I still have it. Yes. And then here I'm going to have, now you see here where we have the post here, I'm going to pass $sign like that, and then two curly braces. And then here I'm going to have that input value. Basically here we are expecting something like 1, maybe 100, and basically these are different posts which have that given ID. So that is what we call the input value. Then here we have dot 10, and then response like this, and then here response dot JSON like this. Down there we'll have dot and then here we're going to pass the data, where you're going to say set data, and then here we're going to pass the data that we have obtained from a public API. Basically what we are doing here, we are just updating our current state variable with the new data that we have got, because we have fetched it here based on what the user has typed as the input value. Now once you are done with that one, you can see here, now this is no longer going to be, it's going to be, of course, it's going to be initial render, and then you're going to have subsequent renders based on the changes on the input value here. So for example, here I'm going to pass the input value. So whenever a user types a new value, this use effect is going to re-render so as to show the updated data from whatever the user has typed. Hoping that one makes sense. So in other words, our dependency array now here contains an input value. So here I'm going to, down here I'm going to define, now this brings us to define a function which is going to handle input change like that. Then this is equal to an event which is going to be detected, and then here we have set to value like that, and then here we have event dot target dot value like that, sorry, and then this is what we have. So once we have that one, here we're going to say since we remove the loading thing, so here we're going to have, here we ensure if of course there's no data here, then this is what you're going to return here. This is what you're going to return. So this one, we remove this one. So here we're going to have, we take out this one there. So here we're going to return input type, and then we also need to have this one like that. All right, so input type, and then this is going to be equal to text, and then here we're going to have value, and then here value of course is going to be the input value, which is going to be typed by the user. So basically what this one is doing here is going to detect the change based on what the user is going to type. So here we're going to undo input change like that, and then so the on change is equal to this one on a curly brace. This is what is going to undo like that, and then here we're going to have a div which is going to do this. This div is just going to, we're just going to set it to be loading while we are waiting for the user to type something. Now down there we are also going to have something like this. So here I would copy this one from there, and then here where we have the div here, I'm going to have that one there. So you're going to wait for the input from the user. Then once we get that input change, that is the value the user is going to type. So here we're going to say the data loaded, and then here we're going to have, this time we're not going to use the map function. So what we'll use here is going to use this. So we're going to say data.title. That's what we're going to return there. Don't need this one, and I believe so the data, sorry, this is data loaded, so we don't need this one. So well, we don't need this one, so don't need any of those. So that is what we do. So here basically here is we just check if there's no data, then this is what is going to be. We're just going to have this one, just, but if there is data, then of course the data is going to be loaded, and then we're just going to return the data dot title like that. So let's check within our application. You can see that this is what is going to be there by default. But if you try to type one like that, try to type two, and see it is not. Did we return? Okay, did we pass this one here? Yes, this is okay. So the error is coming from here. So where we have, so here this quote, is it a quote or a string should not be there, We only have the backticks, the opening and the closing. And when you save this one, you can come back here again and try to type post that as ID of 1. Let's say 60. We can see 60. We also have 100. We also have 20, for example. So what is happening here is that this input value here is being detected, and then of course the use effect is able to re-render the component to give the updated information. That is now the use effect with a dependency. All right, so let's begin the next project.